Hi, I'm Keon, a Senior Research Analyst with Lipper. I'm here to speak to you about fund flows activity for the week ended Wednesday, November 13th. Let's start this week's report by taking a look at the market activity. The major equity indices recorded gains for the third straight fund flows trading week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, the NASDAQ Composite, and the S&P 500 Index were up 1.1%, 0.9%, and 0.6% respectively. These gains extended the indice's fourth quarter returns to 6% for the NASDAQ, 4% for the S&P 500, and 3.2% for the Dow. This week's market news was once again dominated by the U.S.-China trade war. The market took strength from the announcement at the start of the trading week that both sides had agreed to repeal the existing tariffs on each other's goods as phase one of a trade deal. This news lost some of its luster the next day as President Trump stated that he hadn't agreed to anything as of yet and he would not sign off on a complete rollback of the existing tariffs, but a partial one was possible. Let's turn our attention back now to the week's fund flows results. We'll start by taking a look at our fund macro groups. For the week, equity mutual funds suffered net outflows of $3.8 billion. Taxable and Muni bond funds took in $3.4 billion and $1.1 billion respectively, while money market funds had the largest net inflow for the week, $18.4 billion. We'll now explore the changes in each one of these asset groups more closely, starting with equity mutual funds. The $3.8 billion net negative flow was the 39th straight weekly net outflow for the group. All of this week's net negative flows came at the hands of domestic equity funds, which saw approximately $4 billion leave their coffers, while non-domestic equity funds took in about $130 million of net new money. Among the peer groups, large cap growth funds had the largest net outflow in the domestic equity fund universe at $736 million, while international large cap growth funds took in the most net new money on the non-domestic equity fund side of the ledger at $285 million. We'll move on now to our equity ETF group. Equity ETFs recorded their fifth straight weekly increase as they took in $5.6 billion of net new money. These inflows were driven by the iShares Core MSCI EFA ETF and the Invesco QQQ Trust 1, which had net inflows of $1.6 billion and $1.3 billion respectively. The largest net outflow belonged to the SPDR S&P 500 ETF at $2.6 billion. We'll turn our attention now to taxable bond funds, and we'll start with the mutual fund side of things. This group experienced net inflows of $3.4 billion this week, with the largest net positive flows among the peer groups belonging to ultra-short obligation funds and core plus bond funds, which took in $741 million and $734 million respectively of net new money. We'll move on to taxable bond ETFs. This group had net outflows of $1.5 billion last week. The largest individual net negative flow belonged to the iShares 20-plus years Treasury Bond ETF product, as well as the iShares iBox Dollar High Yield Corporate Bond ETF, which saw $656 million and $461 million leave. The iShares Intermediate Term Corporate Bond product had the largest individual net inflow at $207 million. We'll turn our attention now to the Muni Bond Fund Group, which ran their string of weekly net inflows to 45 in a row. This asset group had positive net flows of $1.1 billion last week. The net inflows were once again concentrated within the national Muni peer groups, as general Muni debt funds and high-yield Muni debt funds took in $348 million and $244 million respectively. Our last group to review is money market funds. This group paced the net inflows among the fund asset groups with $18.4 billion. All of the money market fund peer groups recorded net inflows for the week, with the institutional U.S. Treasury money market funds and institutional U.S. government money market funds peer groups leading the way with increases of $6.7 billion and $5.2 billion respectively. That wraps up our week's report. If you'd like to take a closer look at the data for yourself, please go to our website at www.lipperusfundflows.com, and please join us here again next week where another one of our analysts will be speaking about the week's fund flows activity.